Welcome to Resolve IBS and IBD Naturally. I'm Courtney Cowie, a nutrition therapy and functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. If you are struggling with the symptoms of IBS or IBD and want to get to the root cause of your symptoms so you can take back your health through a whole person approach, this podcast is for you. Just a disclaimer that the information I'm presenting in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be taken as medical advice. You should always consult a qualified practitioner before making any changes to your health or medical regimen. That being said, let's get on with the show. So today's live post is actually going to be a bit of a journey back in time for me, and I'm hoping that some of these mistakes I made earlier in my career that I'm going to share with you are serving for you as well as you think about potentially the health regaining journey you're on currently, or as you may be contemplating in the near future, looking for a practitioner to help you get those solutions to your health struggles. I feel like all great practitioners either go through their own personal health struggle of some sort, which definitely is true in my case, or they realized early on what was working and what wasn't working and went out and acquired more skills to get more knowledgeable in the things they needed to help people on a more effective level. Or in other words, you could say they made mistakes or they realized they had shortcomings and then pursued education and skill training to fill those gaps. So I wanted to talk a little bit to you today about what my journey has looked like. And I thought of specifically 4 things I wanted to share with you as I was reflecting back over the last decade or so I've been doing this work. I started my training actually as a nutrition therapy practitioner, and it wasn't till a little bit later that I became a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. So just knowing kind of that history, obviously that in and of itself says that I was limited to what I could do, my skills and training as an NTP, which were still very, very good and worked very well, even early on in the process, but adding that extra piece of the FDN-P certification actually added to and gave me a deeper skill set, as well as some shorter, more focused trainings I've done along the way. So let's just go through these 4 points, these 4 mistakes as I call them, and I'm going to share them with you and then tell you kind of how these came to be. So mistake number 1 is not running a good stool test or checking hormones. Now, again, this was referring to the first part of my career as an NTP. And technically as an NTP, I wasn't really trained to run functional testing, to look at tests and interpret results. We were trained actually a little differently, coming from the lines of chiropractic and osteopathy, based on using what's called lingual neural training, or lingual neuro feedback, essentially. So it's taking, in my case, it was like having a supplement test kit and actually placing a supplement I wanted to check on the client's tongue, and then pretty firmly palpating different reflex points on their body that fed back into various digestive points or other points on the body that would tell me information about whether or not their body indicated this particular supplement is going to help or not really do much for them. And so this would have been presumably as part of a longer intake process where I would have done a lot of information gathering, sat with them for a while, talked about their symptoms, the history, all of that, and then sort of put all that information together in my own head and made a pretty educated guess on, all right, what do I want to check against their body? I'm feeling like they might need some upper GI support. We might want to check liver, gallbladder, see if we put a supplement to support that on their tongue, if we get a good feedback signal, that type of thing. And generally that worked well. What I will say is that just my experience with any kind of body-based testing, whether it's muscle testing, lingual neural testing, they definitely all have a place and they can be a very powerful skill to use. However, it's specific to essentially one supplement at a time that you're checking, and it won't necessarily gather you a broad set of information, including data points that you might not think of in and of yourself, to add to the picture. And so by that reason, I see it as just being a little limiting. Maybe it would be easier if I give an example of what I'm talking about here. So early on in my career, I was not really aware of mold toxicity. I'd say back at that point in time, it wasn't being discussed widely in functional medicine circles as well. So it was kind of just coming to the forefront. But hypothetically, if I had known about it, based on my basic training, there really wasn't a system I had other than maybe assessing detoxification potential in a client to definitively check, do we have mold in this person's body? Do we not, based on lingual neural testing? And similarly, with the presence of certain pathogens like parasites, candida, yeast, right? There were different ways I could indirectly get a sense of that by maybe putting an herbal or specific product on the client's tongue indicated for eradication of those things. And if it came back strongly positive, make a pretty educated guess that's what's going on. But there was no way to definitively know. And I say this because I've been on both the practitioner end as well as the patient end, meaning the person who's hooked up to a biofeedback machine or being muscle tested. And I know that there were pieces to my complex health picture that weren't being picked up by these methods. And it simply is because a lot of times what we're looking for falls within a certain range of functions. And we can certainly find things that indicate opportunity to support. But depending on if we've really reached that deepest root cause, which especially if there's mold toxicity going on, that will be it 9 times out of 10. It's only going to get you so far. And so definitely in the more complex cases I saw, and I feel like with time, the clients coming in my door also got more complex because I think that's just what happens the longer you're a practitioner. I realized that there was information I wasn't able to gather in that way that compelled me to really want to go get more training to start to run some of these tests, which honestly, for a lot of different factors you might be looking at, are the definitive black and white way to decide, do we have this, do we not? And so as I'm talking about this, one caution I'll just throw out to you is I would always be inherently just a little skeptical or take with a grain of salt any feedback you're given if you see a practitioner who uses only biofeedback devices or only muscle testing, just because in my experience, it's not the end all be all of accuracy. And if you really want to know what's going on in the gut, honestly, running a comprehensive stool test is hands down the fastest, best way to do it. And it can give you a whole ton of data really quickly, which is awesome. And that's just one example. So I won't even get into definitively testing for mold, but I would never rely on a muscle test for those things as the end all be all. I would really want to see hardcore evidence that definitively shows we've got XYZ going on in the body. And that makes me that much more confident as a practitioner in the plan I'm going to develop to guide my client. Not to say you can't be an excellent practitioner in other ways, but there is inherently a little bit of user error and just dynamism in the whole muscle testing, lingual neural testing phase, right, or way of doing things. So things won't be the same time to time. Sometimes the way you're testing day in and day out, there's nuances. So that would be my mistake number one, is really not starting with the tests I use now, like the GI map and salivary hormone testing, thyroid testing, those things right out of the gate. Mistake number two is not creating a library of step-by-step nutritional education and resources to support my clients. Now, back when I became a practitioner, the essentially operating in the virtual space, doing Zoom calls, working with a client potentially across the country or across state lines via Zoom was not as normal as it is today. And I think COVID really accelerated this whole process of being able to do healthcare virtually, which is awesome. And it's great technology exists that can literally make that happen and allow you to choose a practitioner literally anywhere, not necessarily just in driving distance from your home. However, back in those days, because I was seeing obviously everyone in face-to-face, one-on-one, I realized over time that a lot of the same foundational issues kept coming up. And it didn't matter if the client was coming in with gut symptoms or they were coming in with like joint pain and wanting to lose weight and were having trouble losing weight. A lot of times when I'd run the nutrition assessment questionnaire and we'd get a few sessions deep into the process, I would see the same exact sort of learning opportunities where I was teaching them a really important concept or just
knowledge gaps across people that I really had to create a lot of the same kind of spiel or resources over and over and over. And for a long time, I would just continually keep giving the same little spiel client to client. And it wasn't until I got a certain ways down that path where I realized that this would just make so much more sense if I could take all of these different conversations I've had with all of these clients, look at the themes across those, and literally develop a foundational library of client centered nutritional education that worked in a stepwise manner. That honestly, if I was going to bring someone off the street to work with me, assuming they had a standard American diet, knew a little bit about nutrition, but maybe not a lot, I could literally kind of have them go through these teachings one by one and incrementally build on their knowledge and understanding in order to basically gain that knowledge to make better choices themselves nutritionally. Now, obviously, this is an adjunct tool I now use alongside literal one-on-one coaching, literally looking at their food journals and giving them very definitive, specific food feedback, a lot of times all the way down to saying, okay, I looked up this product that you like to use every day, and there's this, and this in there, which is going to aggravate this, and this symptom you have. How about these couple of swap out, options? Do you feel good about that? And I'll literally have these conversations on the regular with clients because I want them to feel confident about what changes they're making, which specific products they have available to use, and be very, very clear on what we're talking about. I often will ask my prospective clients at some point in our conversation, have you ever had the experience of going to see your GI doctor or another practitioner, and the only dietary guidance they give you is like a 1 or 2 page handout, maybe it's even stapled, and it's on like the low FODMAP diet, which is common for GI practitioners. And they're just, well, here's a diet, this seems to help and it's widely studied, and here you go. Why don't you go home and just see how that goes? And I mean, it feels okay at the time, but when you get home and you really look at that and you realize how complicated it's going to be, and you're going to have to weigh things out, and now you have to start to remember which foods are high and which foods are low, and there's a lot that goes into that, and a lot of questions will tend to come up when a person's navigating a new diet. And it's just not a situation where that doctor or that practitioner often is readily available or at the disposal of the patient to be a guide to literally hold their hand, answer these questions, give them clear feedback when they're confused about what they're supposed to be doing. And so what I've really done is, on the one hand, created a library of action steps that I personally had to go through in my own learning journey as a practitioner, as I was going from knowing very little about nutrition to knowing what I know now. So a lot of it is my own incremental learning in a sense, but also, like I said, the common lessons that I had to really instill in different clients I worked with, but then offering myself alongside that as an ongoing resource where my clients know a question comes up, they can text me, they can message me, they can email me. I'm pretty good about regularly checking all those things and wanting to clear up anything that's confusing. So it makes a huge difference in their level of confidence and feeling like they can actually make and sustain nutritional and dietary changes that they might not be able to on their own. Are you struggling with chronic diarrhea or constipation and have been told by your doctor that there's either nothing wrong or that you're going to need to take a med for the rest of your life to control symptoms? What if there was another way, a way that empowered you to take back your health through a smart nutritional strategy and through running the right testing to identify true root causes? If you are ready to say yes to self-empowerment and to starting the journey to real improvement in your gut health, click the link to grab my free e-guide. So mistake number 3 is not asking my clients to commit to at least a 3-month process of working with me. And again, this kind of gets back to just where the whole landscape of functional medicine and mindset around client work was a decade ago, prior to COVID, prior to everything becoming more digital. The way, honestly, I remember being educated around just how to set up a practice as a new NTP. Maybe I missed something, but in my mind, if I go back to that, it felt very much like, Well, do a good client interview. If you feel confident about moving forward, go ahead and, if they're agreeable, hire them on, and then, you know, kind of appointment by appointment, sit down with them. And, if one appointment goes well, set up the next appointment. And it was kind of very like almost, do it as you come type of way of practicing. And in the beginning, actually, there was nothing wrong with that. I think trying to get my legs under me and understand what this process would really feel like, and pacing myself and understanding how many clients could I work with in this type of work, how would I do it within my other practice, which is body work, how much time per day or per week are we dedicating. I think it was okay to start out that way, and I think this is actually very, very common for majority of practitioners, and some practitioners quite honestly practice this way their entire life, and that's absolutely fine. In fact, there's a number of different functionally trained medical doctors or nurse practitioners in my area that have, a brick and mortar, and it's very much appointment by appointment without necessarily any kind of like program or, defined process there. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, what I will say is, since I've shifted to more of a like 3-month basic program for entry clients, I really feel like that's made a huge difference in terms of their desire to stay committed for a long enough period to see really good results, and to kind of set expectations in a realistic way too, because let's be honest, for what we're talking about, nutrition, testing wise, writing a plan to address things we find on tests, we're using natural, holistic things like herbs and supplemental support. They don't work overnight. So I often tell clients, once we get tests back, we might find things going on in the gut that could take usually at least 2 months, sometimes upwards of 6 months, depending again on how many different things are going on. So I know at a bare minimum, if someone's been struggling enough that they've already exhausted their options, maybe with their receiving several doctors, and now they're, sitting down with me and they're interested, that we need to really have a commitment to work together for at least 3 months. And so that gives me enough time to track, what's going on with them. What do I see as far as challenges coming up with them? Do regular check-ins with them and make sure that everything's going the right direction. They're not getting stuck. They're not getting confused. They're not bailing on some part of the plan that we wrote, really trying to, in a sense, I think, keep them encouraged, keep them motivated. I think psychologically from their end too, there's this reality that, they kind of, again, are in it for this defined period of time. And I think psychologically that helps to kind of give somebody bounds for a process that, that feels realistic, that feels doable. So that would be my mistake number 3. Mistake number 4 is not having skills to offer my clients who knew that stress and trauma were part of their physical health struggle. Now, a lot of times clients come in and this information will just naturally come out. A lot of times, though, it doesn't. And what I've learned over the years of doing this, and also again through my own health journey, is that this is almost always a part of the process, especially if we're dealing with someone who's been struggling with their health for many months, if not years. And they have tried different foundational baseline things like diet change, whatever, and it's not working. That to me indicates that there's a deeper level beyond the physical body that's probably playing a role here. And a lot of times that gets into the emotions and the nervous system and stored trauma in the body and stress and some of these maladaptive thought patterns that could go all the way back to childhood. And so as I've had to very much kind of pursue this as a bit of a tangent in my own path, and then, things have come up in my own training around this whole theme of especially the vagus nerve and the role that plays in terms of balancing the nervous system and helping to bring down inflammation in the body. Like, it's very, very important, I feel, that clients have more than just nutrition or diet and root cause testing. I feel that they need more comprehensive support than that to really get well, but also use those skills to maintain their health for the long haul. And so it's quite possible that in 3 months, someone won't be done with the work of healing their gut or done completely with the work of getting back to a better place. my goal is to get them feeling significantly better, even if that process takes longer, right? But really, what I'm trying to do is teach them a variety of skills that my hope is they're actually instilling into their day to day lives. And they're finding ways to incorporate these regularly, even if it's just a few minutes, even if it's just some small practices they're doing. If it looked different than what they were doing before we started working together, I'm confident that that alone is going to start to add up incrementally for them over time. And, lifestyle and mindset, and you could say bottom up types of trauma support, or just, emotional regulation support, that can take time as well, because a lot of times by the time we're an adult, a lot of these other patterns, emotionally speaking, have been hardwired into our body, just like trying to heal the gut and eradicate all these different potential bugs we found from stool testing. It takes time. It's like a river that's kind of routed a deep rut in a canyon. I mean, it's going to take time to kind of change that path or change that course. But typically people who really do take these practices to heart, and specifically I'm talking about the different tools and training that I offer nowadays as a practitioner, do really start to notice a difference perceptively. And again, even if they're not all the way there, it's making a big enough difference for them within a realm of 2 to 3 months. So just to recap these mistakes again, because I know I talked a lot in between them. Mistake number 1, not running a good stool test and checking hormones for my clients. Mistake number 2, not creating a library of step-by-step educational guidance on nutrition and then resources to support my clients. Mistake number 3, not asking clients to commit to a 3-month program. And mistake number 4, not having skills to offer my clients who knew that stress and trauma were part of their physical health struggle. So I hope that was helpful, or at least gives you something new to think about.
Did you find this episode informative and helpful? I'd love to have you leave me a 5-star rating. Do you have questions about holistic approaches to optimizing gut health that you'd like to ask? Please leave your question or comment below, and I will be sure to address it personally or cover it in a future episode. Be sure to check the show notes for any resources mentioned in today's episode. See you next time.